So I'm now expecting you to accept parts of me that I don't accept for myself. I don't even want to look at it, but you should look at it. What, you can't smell your fingers, or like, but you want someone else to be face first in all of you, but no, you ain't looking at it?
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I didn't know where we were at first. And then when you face first, like with your hands like that. Face first in all of you.
I tried to be subtle because I could tell you were like, are we going?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the goddamn Codependent Podcast. Today, our topic is the shadow / reputation, and something like that.
Shadow work.
Shadow work. I like that. Shadow work. How do we do it? What is the shadow we're working on? And the blah, 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 blah. So I hear a lot of people talking about shadow work. The shadow itself. But exactly what is the shadow?
So people will typically say, I don't want to say people will typically say, but like, you know how there's two definitions? There's like the clinical definition, and then there's like the popular colloquial definition.
Right.
So from a colloquial perspective, or a more popular pop culture perspective, I think people tend to think shadow work or shadow is the bad parts of you. Okay. Which is a component of it. What shadow is the parts of you that you've been taught were bad.
Okay.
Parts of you that you've been taught were negative or not good or mean or evil or whatever. Okay. All of those parts, right? That's the shadow, right? So if you think about your human physical being, there's your part, there's your being, and then there's the like literal shadow that comes behind you that only shows up certain lights and forms, right? Right. So that's the component of these negative things, these things that we've been told are negative, that we don't want to show up, so we're trying to hide, but from time to time they pop up and they show up. Okay. So we will oftentimes tell people, that's not me, that's not me, that's not who I am, or like, this isn't who I am, these negative things, as opposed to what shadow work does is teach us to accept these are parts of you. This is you, so to speak. It's not all of you, but it is a part of you, and in order to fully accept yourself, you have to accept all of yourself, including your shadow. Okay. Okay. Now, You said stuff that the shadow is things that you were taught were wrong. What is an example? What is an example of something that you got taught when you were young that sticks with you and starts to form the shadow? You should get good grades. Getting bad grades makes you a bad kid or a bad student. Getting bad grades makes you dumb. Okay. Getting bad grades make you a rebel or rebellious or don't care, right? Not fitting into certain standards makes you lazy, right? Like if you're not working when somebody else is working, they'll call you lazy. Okay. Not fitting into certain standards makes you weird, so you'll get called weird.
Now, how does this form pieces of a shadow? How is that?
So,
because if I'm 20 years old now,
I'm weird, right? So I'll give you an example. Say I have a weird quirk, which you see a lot of times. I move a lot, or I have little fidgets, or I do certain things, right? So if people have made fun of that within me, what is my likely behavior?
Hiding that behavior.
Okay, suppress it, right. Adjust it. That takes energy, right? It's not the same, but when you talk about Asperger's, they talk a lot about masking. People mask their behaviors all the time. So it's like these are things that they have realized that society considers them weird for, so they hide it and they suppress it. But they'll tell you that means their brain has to do a lot of processing, which is why some may be better able to do it than others, right? The same as in society, some are better able to hide their quirks, whatever that is, or their shadows, whatever that is, right? Like, we talk a lot about Kanye in the black community. He's not hiding his shadow. These are things that society's saying you shouldn't do. He's doing things that people are telling him there's ways we're supposed to act that he's not acting. And we all do things that society doesn't like. We all do things that society wouldn't approve of, or things that we shouldn't do. Every single person does things we shouldn't do, but we don't necessarily broadcast it, which is why that's considered your shadow. Like, even thinking of the literal definition of the shadow, you can only see it in certain light. So a lot of times things that we've been taught are bad, we still do them. We just lie to ourselves and to other people about doing them, right? Like, that's the definition of a lie already, right? People, you never heard anyone say they're a liar.
So that's an interesting piece of the shadow, right? That's a huge part, because that word right there, like, hey, hey, seriously, people will fight you from this. And this goes back to elementary and all these years. If you call somebody
a liar,
if you call somebody a liar, they will fight you off that. If you call your parent a liar, you're doing a huge disrespect. But we all know that all those people lie.
All of them. Matter of fact, I think you laughed at me, or you would tease me early in our marriage because I was so religious in that sense, where it's like, no, like, you're like, you can tell a white lie. Like, you don't have to be fully like this strung to this little rule and legalism, which is where you start to see society. There's this weird spectrum, because if you adhere too closely to the rules, that's weird. You see what I mean? Like the person who's too stringent, monk. Perfect example, right? He's so ridiculous about these rules when it's not appropriate. So we know you're supposed to break rules. But we don't tell people to break rules. That's confusing as hell, right? So like, even that, like, you're supposed to follow certain things, but you're also supposed to break them. So when do you follow them?
Like the person who's driving 55 on the highway is a dickhead.
Ridiculous.
You're a dickhead.
Ridiculous. I'm driving safe. Are you?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the shadow, overall, what I'm hearing from you, is formed by societal judgment, social interactions, where you learn what do people feel negatively about, what do people complain about, where are the judgments coming from, where we're going wrong, bad, and nasty, and not good. And then anything you do in that arena, you try to hide, and that starts to become the shadow. The things you're hiding from judgment, you put into the shadow, or even subconsciously gets put into your shadow.
Both, I think, right? Some things you put in, some things are put into you, right? Because even to what you were saying, some stuff is your own insecurity, right? And a lot of times I think there's this concept that like low self-esteem is only from you, right? Like a 2-year-old can't have low self-esteem. Like, where is that coming from? Like, where would that come from? Like, where would depression come from? You don't typically hear about depression or self-esteem or any of those things in kids that are under school age, which already starts to tell me that some of that comes from being school-aged, right? What happens in school? All of a sudden now you're surrounded by a lot of opinions outside your home and points of view outside of your home, which is so are your parents, which is now added pressure from your parents too. Because you're being observed in a new setting. That's a reflection of them. You're also in a new setting, so that's something you have to adapt to. So that's a lot of adjustments and changes for kids. That's not going to go smoothly every time, right? Like, every single incident or encounter with another peer from kindergarten to high school, what's the chances of that going smooth? Every single encounter with your peer every day.
And so you're saying the shadow, we're adding to it as we go through life from these interactions. What do we learn worked? What do we learn didn't? Where did I get praise? Where did I get scorn?
Absolutely. And I think adding to it is the fact that we didn't really start studying mental health or like applying mental health until more modern society. So there's no processing of any of that, right? Which is what the shadow work is about, right? Like the shadow is the parts of myself that I've rejected, or the parts of myself I've been told to reject, right? Because if we're being honest, like people say they don't care what people think, go deeper, right? Like you're talking about 20-year-old whoever you are doesn't care what anyone thinks.
Right.
20 years later, I'm talking about 2-year-old, same person, Sherry at 2. I can't do shit for myself, which means what am I being introduced to? What music am I being introduced to? What foods am I being introduced to? What languages am I being introduced to? What environment? What textiles or touches or like all of that is outside my control, which means by the time I'm 10, where personality is already somewhat developed, I had no control over none of that.
Right.
Which means my thoughts, my beliefs, my ideas, my values, a lot of that came from what I was taught. Right? So what was bad was taught to me by whoever I was around. That's going to be subjective by different people that I'm around.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's going to be a big part of it. Like, what did your family or caregiver or person that was in charge of you, what did they tell you was bad?
And that's what I wrote down next. Do different people have different types of shadows then? So everybody,
does your shadow look like my shadow?
Right, in
Literally?
real life. Right. Yeah, exactly. So they're just as unique as us. Our shadows are.
Absolutely. Okay. And there's similarities, right? Like obviously in every area we're going to have same things, right? Like shadow work, you can guess it or you can oftentimes identify it just like positivity, right? Like it's easy to come up with a positive mantra. You've heard 1,000 of them. So you've also heard 1,000 of these negative concepts, right? Like you have like body image. How many people deal with body image?
Right.
Which means those are things you've been taught about how you should look, which is already asinine. You can't, like there's certain parts of your looks you can kind of control on some level.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff about your looks you had nothing to do with. Nothing.
Right.
But you still got to deal with ideas and images and opinions about how you should or shouldn't look.
Right.
That you have to then process.
Right.
Or not process, which is either way is going to impact you and affect you.
And is it the not processing of these triggers and criticisms that create or add to or strengthen the shadow? Is it the not processing?
Absolutely, right? Because if I'm not aware of something, I can't adjust it. I can't manage it, right? And so it's one of the hardest things for me to communicate to people through therapy, right? If you're sitting with me and you're telling me, hey, that car right there is red, you see the car and that is red. If someone is sitting here next to both of us and you can say, hey, I see that car is red, and they say, I don't see the car is red, obviously that's a concern, right? Like you and I see a red car, this person doesn't see a red car. So their ability to see is impacted. Would you beat that person? Like punch them in their face because they can't see that red car?
I wouldn't.
So that is the challenge when it comes to mental health, right? I'm telling you to take your shoes off when you get in the house. You don't take it off. I am reminding you of something that is important to me so I can do it. You can't do it because it's not something that your brain has been trained and resonated and registered to do over time. So it's a natural thing for me. It's not a natural thing for you. But in that moment, do I say, oh, well, it makes sense, right? I've been taking my shoes off since I was 15 years old. You haven't been taking your shoes off since you were 15 years old.
Right.
So, of course, you can't do what I'm doing. Or, of course, it's not natural for you to do what I'm doing. Just like it's not natural for this person to see that red car, but it was natural for you to see it. You don't love me. You don't care. You're a terrible person. You're a jerk because you're not doing things that I'm wanting you to do. But there's not a processing because we can't always see or understand the whole context of that individual. Like, obviously, this was dramatic. Like, oh, the car's there. Everyone sees the car. How come you can't see the car, right? But if it's we pull up to a fast food place and you're frustrated and I'm not frustrated, people don't see that that's the same.
Right. In the everyday, day to day.
In the every single day, like moment to moment reactions or interactions about things, people are responding differently based on ability. Yeah. Not based on desire, right? Like nobody wants to go off. Nobody wants to lose their temper. Yeah. Which therefore means I have less ability to do something that you can do. Why? That's the shadow, right? That's a part of what we're saying. Like you should respond a certain way in society every day. All the time. I'm acknowledging I can't respond the same way all day every day. You acknowledge you can't respond the same way all day every day. True. But in the moment when you're responding calm and I'm not, why ain't you calm? We just said we're not going to respond the same. Yeah, but why ain't you calm now? I'm calm. Ours aren't going to always align. But in those moments, it becomes something different or something that means more as opposed to this person is not able to right now. They don't want to. They don't care to. It's a whole bunch of things that we project onto that person in that moment. That's a part of that shadow. We all know we're human. We all say human means to make errors, to make mistakes. And yet every time someone makes a mistake, including ourselves, the reaction is beat them in the head. Like you just said, I'm not going to tell that person that can't see the car, I'm not going to punch you in your face because you can't see the car. Yeah. That's crazy. I'm not going to punch a 5-year-old in the face because they drew on the table as much as I may want to. Like, why would you draw on the table? They don't know. So you recognize that makes sense for them. When it comes to us, we don't know what makes sense for each other. So now it's like, why don't you know how to do this? Yeah. Because no one ever taught me, because I never learned, because I never had that experience. But that's a part of, like, when we say shadow, that's why that terminology is even powerful. We just said you don't see the shadow all the time. Yeah. Right? So for you, it's like a blind spot. I know you as Travis because I see you every day. I can recognize you. I'm familiar, right? But if sometimes you showed up as Travis and then sometimes you were disguised and you were Miguel and sometimes you were disguised, it would be a lot harder for me to identify you, right? Because the shadow's not consistent, so to speak, right? Like your shadow doesn't show up in every light. Right, right. So we don't see it all the time, right? So that's the same about these negative parts of ourselves. We've been suppressing them. So we don't always see them and everyone else doesn't always see them, and we don't really even want people to see them because we've been told they're bad, they're negative, they're this. So because we've suppressed it, we can now tell ourselves this don't exist. This isn't a part of me. This isn't me. I made some mistakes sometimes, but that's not what I really do. That's not who I am. Right. But when you do a mistake, I don't know you like that. I'm familiar with myself. Right. Because I live with myself every day. So now my mistakes, this is where the fundamental attribution error comes in, right? My mistakes, that ain't me. That's not me. I know that's not me. I don't do that all the time. This was an error. This was a mistake. Like, yeah, because I was upset. Yeah, because I was drunk. Yeah, because of this. Yeah, because of that. When it's me. When it's you, you are a piece of shit. You are disloyal. You are a screw up. You are lazy. You are all of these things because I don't have enough context to know that you're trying. I don't have enough context to know what you started off with, where you came from. And I may not even have the luxury to entertain that. I may not even give a fuck about it. I don't care what you've been through, what you went through, why. But that's a part of it, right? When me and you try to explain to our kids perspective, like what their teacher's thinking, what the person's thinking, what someone else is thinking, they don't care. They're like, yeah, I don't care. I care about how it's impacting me. That is a teenage mindset. We know that's something that theoretically you grow out of, right? You mature out of, so to speak. So that's why I said it's hard for me to explain that to people, because that's a sign of maturity, right? And we don't all mature at the same rate, which is, like you said it earlier about another wording. Imagine calling someone immature. Chests are gonna puff. Oh, you call me immature? Yeah. Oh my God, that's offensive to people. Yeah. But it's ridiculous because our kids are more mature than us in so many ways, and obviously there's ways we're more mature than them. Right. But there's definitely ways that they're more mature than us. And the maturity is a spectrum, right? So there's going to be times you're more mature than me and I'm more mature than you. Sure. And there's going to be certain areas you may have more maturity in because you've had more experience. And is that what that means? Is that how we're defining mature? Is
when your behavior matches up as if you've had experience, then you're seasoned and learned.
Absolutely. That's a great point to say. Like, it's experience, right? So once your experiences are manifesting in your behaviors.
Boom, mature, which is volatile.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Come on.
I love that.
Come on.
We are decoding words, ladies and gents.
But it's crazy because it is a subjectivity to it, which is why it's easy to say you're not doing it, right? Like, or you're not on point, or like, let me point out your shadow. Not my own. I'm hiding mine. I'm suppressing mine. Yeah. I'm not even identifying with mine. That's not me. That's not me.
Separate.
Yeah, that's very separate. But when it comes to someone else, it's like, oh, that's you.
Yeah, put it right in their lap.
No, because remember last time you said this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Right? No, because remember last time you did this, this, and this. But when it's your way, oh, so one time I do something and now this is who I am? You don't see nothing else I do for you? It's the same shit that we do. And it's manifesting in different ways. So we're like, oh, no, I don't do that. Well, you kind of did it right there.
So, what does it look like when somebody is not owning their shadow? How does it present?
From the outside, people consider it defensively.
Okay.
It's so when you have a conversation with a person who's only presenting their good traits, or it feels like they're selling themselves to you, right? Like they're telling you all of these accomplishments, all this money they make, all of these things they do, even overly talking about themselves a little bit, almost like they're trying to sell you, right? That's a part of like the shadow work. Even sometimes me and you talk about it in our dating segment when we're like, what questions to ask somebody, right? Yeah. So like when they're reflecting on their behaviors, when they're reflecting on things that have happened, it's always someone else's fault. Okay. There's never any reflection of what they needed to do or that they did anything wrong, because they can't. Like, I'm not owning mistakes or owning
not acknowledging that.
Not really acknowledging that type of thing. Yeah. Don't sit in like even some of that, sometimes it's mirrored or not mirrored, sometimes it's masked as positivity. I don't like to sit in the negativity. I don't like to be negative or dwell on things, right? So that sounds positive, but in reality what you're saying is I don't ever sit and acknowledge and look at what I've done. How can I grow? What do I need to do differently? Do I need to change? Yeah. Which is also why it then comes off as what everyone else needs to do to change.
I read this thing called spiritual bypassing, where basically I use my spirituality of any form to hide behind or mask or suppress or not deal with present day dilemma.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think we talked a little bit about that in our religious and or suicide segment. Probably. Because I see it with suicide, right? I'm a Christian, I'm not suicidal. Yeah. I'm a Christian, I'm not this.
And that's dangerous.
I'm not. You didn't even allow yourself to really. So then we'll start, which is why people hate assessments, because we ask the same question over and over but in different ways. If I come straight out and ask you, are you suicidal? You may say no. Was there ever a time you wish you weren't born? That's a different question. Yeah. But that might let me know, right? Have you, like, when you feel fed up, what are the thoughts? What are you feeling? What is it like you're kind of experiencing in that moment, right? And so, like you said, a lot of people, I'm not that, so no. No, but in reality, you are, right? Even with just anxiety and depression, a lot of people, I don't have a diagnosis. I'm just here for, guidance through regular stuff. I'm not crazy. I don't have a diagnosis. I don't have a disorder. Right. Okay. But why are you saying that? Why do you need to identify in that way? Why do you need to not be crazy or need to not be, you said it before in your own past, you weren't jealous. Why do you need to not be jealous?
What are the risks associated with, or what is the danger or potential harm, if any, in not owning the shadow, not doing the work, and not going through and being real about the parts that make you feel the shame and everything else? What is the harm in not doing that work?
Well, it's connecting through masks. So the connection is never, it's shallow. There's no depth to that connection, right? Like, most people who have friends from their early childhood, that relationship's not the same as their friends later in life, right? When you think of early childhood friendship dynamics, we were in class together. We both like to color with crayons. Like, you like to double dutch. We played the same things. There's no depth of conversation, right? But when you start talking about high school, college, after like young adult years, we're talking about politics, we're talking about religion, we're talking about relationships. There's a lot more components and factors that could influence that relationship, which means if it's not a deeper, like if we haven't worked through some deeper level things, it may not work, which is where you start to see for every person I've ever worked with, like their relationships change as they get older, and everyone takes it personal because they don't have the same point of view that I have. Like, I'm looking at thousands of people. And they're looking at their own life. So they're like, oh, I'm losing all these friends. So have I. So have all these thousands of people, because you're talking about childhood friendships and middle school friendships versus college and adulthood friendships. It's going to naturally shift.
Yeah.
But in those moments, we're not aware that that's normal. Right? And we're not even aware that this is an occurrence that is happening amongst others and other people. So when it's happening to us, it's happening because we have to have a reason. This person's a terrible person. Or I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
I did something terrible. I did something horrible. It can't possibly be because our timing was off. Our development was off. Our triggers were off, right? Because I've known a lot of people who done a lot of things that the world would consider fucked up that I love. Because they didn't do it to me. Because there's a lot of people who did fucked up shit to me that I don't talk to.
Straight up. Yeah. Yeah.
But we don't realize, like, what you're saying, like, it's like, oh, this person's a terrible person. Are they? Because you've done terrible. I've done fucked up things to people. Am I a terrible person all the time? But that's part of what this shadow work is about, right? Like, exploring that and kind of sitting with that. Because am I what I've done? Right? Is what I've done what defines me? Because
a lot of people will say yes.
Okay, so a lot of people will say yes. So who's always done everything perfectly and right?
Maybe nobody, but I can imagine somebody saying, we're going to judge you kind of on the average.
Okay. So on the average, according to whom?
Right. That's the sticky bits. And honestly, a lot of times we're going to judge you based on our own belief systems and how well you line up with it.
So remember, we said that the shadow is the things that we've been taught by others not to accept in ourselves.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, which is why the shadow work is for me to learn to define for myself how I want to maneuver and operate. Because like you just said, if I'm going based on what others are telling me, I'm constantly changing, which is that harm. You're like, what's the harm? I'm a chameleon. What you think is acceptable, what they think is acceptable, what this person thinks is acceptable, what this person thinks is acceptable, that's going to be different, which means I have to change in all these different environments. Yeah. And that's a lot of energy and a lot of work for me to do that, to kind of keep all of these people happy, right?
Right.
Which is where that term people pleasing comes from. I don't think it's necessarily a pleasing concept. It's like peace, right? Like, because if there's conflict, that's problems.
Yeah.
So we look at it as like, oh, this person wants to make everyone like them. No, this person wants to make everything calm and peaceful and safe.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, who wants to deal with
like
yelling and screaming and fighting and arguing? Because even in the most base level of disagreement, it's stressful.
Yeah, it's for sure.
Disagreeing, which means conversation back and forth, energy, expenditure.
Yeah.
So I think that we forget it because of the labels. Like you said, again, where's the harm? We create these terms. We create these labels. We create these stigmas, these connotations on these terms that should be neutral. Right? Like, anger is neutral. It shouldn't be a good or bad. What I do with that anger may be good or bad, right? But why is the anger? It's just a reality. Sometimes we get angry. Sometimes we get sad. Sometimes we're happy.
We call it wrong or bad when it hurts someone.
We also said that to be human is to make mistakes, which means we can't help but to hurt people. This is a part of the shadow work, because the individuals haven't done shadow work, society hasn't done shadow work. So society has determined that relationships should be flawless. So name one. Where have we seen a relationship that doesn't have someone hurting the other person? Name a relationship that we have with anyone we know and they've never hurt us. Mother, father, sibling, cousin, uncle, whoever. Like, they've never done anything. And sometimes, I'm not saying, because we love to talk about outliers and anomalies. They do exist. But they probably exist in people you haven't spent a lot of time with. Haven't been in close proximity to. Right? Because if we're talking about every single day in the same house, we're going to get on each other's nerves.
Right, by probability.
Oh my gosh. We just hungry, grumpy, hard day at work, hard day at school. Somebody picked on me outside of this home. Somebody said something to me outside of this home. Got bills due, got assignments due, got projects due. I mean, there's so much shit that happens in a regular day. That's no one's fault, that makes us irritable or frustrated or angry. But that's my point. So how can angry be wrong? That isn't even anyone did it to you yet. You're already angry. So where does that emotion go when now this person bumps into you? At them. But is that bumping into them by accident conducive to an explosive reaction from you when you know they said sorry, right? So that's what I'm saying. We're not putting into context. We're like, yeah, because they bumped into me, so that's why I was angry. Well, should it got to that level of anger?
Right.
Because there's also kids that bump into you that you don't get into that level of anger from, right? Like, and believe it or not, we release on people that it feels safer to release on. So you know it's not safe to release on that kid. That's why you don't. All of society would ostracize you. So that goes into, like, we don't care what people think. Everyone would ostracize you if you uppercutted a kid for bumping into you. That would be insane. We do care what people think, because we wouldn't be able to have jobs. We wouldn't be able to have relationships. We wouldn't be able to have community groups, functions, anything, right? Like, if you're ostracized by all of society, you're like a hermit. We want to connect with people. We enjoy connecting with people. Why does a compliment feel good? If I don't care what you think, why did you complimenting my outfit feel good? Why did you tell me something nice about myself? Why did that feel good to me? Why did you liking my project? You might not have even known it was attached to me. You seen something I did, you liked it. Why does that feel good to me? You compliment a car. I ain't even buy that. I mean, I bought it, but I ain't even fix it. I didn't make it. I didn't create it. I did nothing. I picked it out of a line, but that feels good to me that you like my car. What did I have to do with that? Absolutely, we care what people think, but that's part of the shadow work. We don't want to care what people think. So that's what we communicate. Absolutely. I don't want to. I don't want it to control me. That's what we're also saying. I don't want to let this control me. And sometimes it does. That's part of the shadow work.
That's where you got the fear from in the first place.
Absolutely. Which is what we said. Sometimes it controls me. Sometimes it negatively affects me. So I don't want to identify, but that's not every day, all day. But what we say is, I'm never that person. That's not me. Well, it's not always you.
And that's the thing I wish I could tell people and myself. You cannot be these things. Like, the application doesn't work that way. You see what I'm saying? It's not an eligibility for you to be labeled by action. Not that I'm saying, hey, here's your action, I'm labeling you it, and now we can have a debate on that, and am I a good person or a bad person? It's impossible for your being to be labels. These are words.
Absolutely. But this is where we're getting in. Well, that's a whole different podcast episode.
Okay.
But that's the whole, every LGBTQ, trans, gender, socialization, like all these conversations are in exactly what you just said. Because how could you label me?
Right.
Call me a bitch. Did I metamorphosize in front of you? Right. Did I change who I am in front of you?
Right.
Call me gay. Call me a man. Call me a woman. Call me stupid. Call me ugly. Call me beautiful. What about me? who I am just now shifted.
Because of what you said, yeah.
My arms did because I moved them, but that's about it. Like you just said, so nothing about me and my core shifted based on the label.
Right.
But how I identify what you say could trigger something in me. Mm-hmm. And that's another hard thing for people to understand, because I can't trigger something unless it was in you. So you felt a type of way. You first identified as wanting to be something and wanting not to be something. That's your shadow work.
Absolutely.
I want to be like this. I don't want to be like this. Right. This is cool. This is lame. This is smart. This is dumb.
Right.
This is funny. This is corny.
Right.
These are the things I want to identify as. These are not parts of myself. That's not me. That's not who I am. That's not what we do.
Yeah. And so you have to let go of labels, both on the positive and negative, in part of your shadow work, because there's an opposite to the shadow that you're probably identifying with that strengthens the shadow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is where meditation comes in, right? Which is why I always say meditation, a lot of these things all are going in parallel, because they're asking you to do the same thing. They're telling you, which is same true for religion, not in its toxic form, but in its more base form. It's telling you to step away from self, right? Step away from self so I can look at self objectively, right? Like, don't judge others, don't judge yourself. Step away. Let's just look at it, because if I'm already coming in with a judgment, I'm already biased, right? I've already determined, judged, this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
So how can I look at if this is good? I already said it was bad. That's all I'm willing to hear, which is what you say, how is it detrimental? You see that in conversations. You see that in interacting with people. You try to have a conversation with them. You try to engage with them. You try to explain a point of view, and no.
Yeah.
No.
I saw dichotomous thinking tied to
into
this.
Shadow work?
On shadow work, yeah.
Absolutely, because it's like a all or nothing, which is what that dichotomous thinking is, right? Yeah. It's one way or no way, right? So it's good or it's evil. It's right or it's wrong. Good or bad. So because this is good, that has to be bad? No.
Right.
So I can't explore that this could have good in it, and I can't explore that this could have bad in it. That's it. It's just bad. That's it. Nope. Is it possible? Nope. No other way. But that's tricky, because like we just said, things exist on a spectrum. There's a lot of gray areas in society. Culture and others are who determine what's good or bad to us, right? So if that was determined before I was even 10, I'm now saying nope. This is bad based on what someone else taught me 20 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm now fixed in what I know to be true, but how could I know it? Someone else taught me this 20 years ago. I didn't learn this. I didn't discover this, right? When you talk about learning and discovering, that means I went out, I studied a book. Even studying is on some level someone else's discovery, right? Like reading is already someone else's discovery. I'm talking about first-hand experimentation. I did this thing, right? I poured the noodles into the boiling water. I saw the noodles expand and start to cook. I can see when they get a little more translucent or whatever. Okay, now I'm learning that this is the cooking process. I'm adding salt. I had to do certain shit and experience it to truly understand. You could tell me boil the noodles. You can tell me box directions of making mac and cheese, and I can do it. But the more I personally do it, the more I can see, oh, when they say it'll start to look different, I see the difference.
Right.
I can bite through the noodle and see when it's al dente versus when it needs to be more time versus, like, you can't do that the first time you ever made macaroni and cheese. So you think in your mind, we just said humans make mistakes, but in our minds, the first time we ever make macaroni and cheese, I'm about to kill it. Oh, I'm about to crush it. It's going to be delicious. So you're instantly setting yourself up because I'm a good cook or whatever, or that's not where I am. I don't want to be that bad cook or whatever this label is I told myself. So now I've created this expectation in myself, right? And now I can't fulfill that expectation because who kills it the first time of everything they ever do in life?
Right.
And now I'm a piece of shit. Or flip it, I've created that expectation of you, and now you disappoint me. Now you're a piece of shit.
Yeah. So how do we work on the shadow? How do we do shadow work? What's the first step?
Oh, so first step is challenging because like what we say in a lot of things with mental health, it's just a bunch of different things to try, right? Like to help you. One is acknowledging the parts of yourself you don't like to acknowledge. Owning the parts of yourself you don't like to own. So for instance, you and I used to do an exercise in shadow work that the kids may or may not have known we were doing with them, but we were doing it with them. Tell me something you're good at. Tell me something you need to work on. Tell me an area. Tell me something you're strong in. Tell me an area you need to improve in. We love to tell our strengths. Remember, that goes back into the how do you see when the shadow work is being activated, right? In conversation, this person is only telling you their strengths because they've never developed the skill to identify or be comfortable expressing their weaknesses, right? So that's something that you start practicing, expressing it to yourself. You don't have to express everything to everybody. That's not part of what I'm saying. But that will also come about over time. You will start to see that it is easier for you to also express it to others, but it's baby steps, right? So like I wouldn't tell somebody to just day one go out onto the platform and just yell out all of the things you've ever been embarrassed about or ashamed of. That's crazy.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's like, but we laugh at it, right? So now think about Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, because that's where I really give them a lot of respect and praise, because that's what they're doing, right? They're talking about things that they're embarrassed or ashamed of, and the world is judging it because they don't understand shadow work. Because they don't understand emotional regulation, because they don't understand that I can tell you you're allowed to have female friends. So never for the rest of these days of our lives is that ever going to trigger me or make me jealous. That's insane.
Right.
That's this shadow work. Oh, I'm not jealous ever. I'm not insecure ever. I have no issues. I'm always confident. I'm always perfect. I'm always together. I'm always. That's not realistic. So now I'm creating this unrealistic expectation of myself and you. Never trigger my jealousy. Yeah. No one can trigger it because I'm saying it don't exist.
Yeah.
So I can't trigger it and you can't trigger it. And if anyone triggers it, we're not even identifying it. We're pretending it didn't happen.
That's where fights happen.
That's where fights happen. Yeah. Oh, what you said, I'm this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Are you?
Yeah.
Did you ever think you might be? Have you ever, like you said, sat with it? Could you ever have thought about, could I be wrong?
No, see, it's an insult, and from the insult, we just get into the fight.
How dare you?
Yeah.
It goes back to what you're saying about liar, right? That's so offensive because we put a negative connotation on it, but it means you didn't tell the truth.
Right.
Right? So what is the difference between lying and making a mistake?
Well, one's on purpose, they'll say. Like, I'm lying, I'm purposefully deceiving.
Okay, so it's not telling the truth on purpose.
Right.
So your shirt is pink.
And you're a liar.
But what if I see your shirt is pink? Right?
Well, I guess
which is why we're saying what's the difference between a lie and mistake? Because little kids will tell their parents, oh, we're going to the store today. Hey, son, guess what? Things have changed in the plan. Things have changed in our schedule. We're not going to the store today. You're a liar. Pop.
Yeah.
Because that's offensive.
Yeah.
You, on purpose, didn't tell the truth. That's what the kid's like, what is happening?
Yeah.
You told me one thing, now you're telling me something else. And you intentionally did both of those things. But that's not the full context. And that's why we're laughing at it. But in their brain, it is. And it takes time for them to mature and to understand there's more to the story. There's more understanding. There's more context. We even laugh and joke as parents about how growing up, now becoming parents, we understand our parents. There's things I can't understand as a teenager or as a kid that an adult can understand. No matter how smart they are, how genius they are, you haven't had certain experiences that the dumbest adult has had.
Yeah, sure.
So there's going to be things that you're missing that person knows from experience that you don't know. Just like you may have known certain things that they don't know from experience. Because experience isn't only living it and going through it. It's a lot of things that encompass it. But that's part of the problem. If I'm thinking as an adult, I know, I'm not looking at what I don't know. So I can't receive from this kid. I can't receive from this person that doesn't have a certain title, that looks a certain way or acts a certain way. If I create these ideas, these belief systems about what's good or what's bad. Now, if you dress a certain way, I can trust you. If you dress a certain way, I can't trust you. But we know that's not true. Which is how it becomes problematic, right? Because you laugh at me all the time. I can read people. But my reading's been off how many times?
Yeah.
I've been off about people lots of times before too. Do I read some of it? Yes. Did you read all of it? Hell no. You missed that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Didn't see that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, you saw this, and this, which is what we get on, right? Like, oh, I can read people because I saw 3 out of 10 things. You missed the other 7.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at what you're doing, right? If that's where identity is. This is what I like to say about myself.
Yeah.
This is what I don't like to say about myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that I'm dumb. I don't want to say that I'm struggling. I don't want to say that I'm poor. I don't want to say that I'm not funny. Whatever it is. But we're all there at different moments in time. Sometimes we're funny, sometimes we're not.
Yep.
But people want to be a comedian. People don't want to be not funny.
Yeah. And they go together. Yeah. That's good. That's good. What else can we do?
You know what sounds crazy? Which they go together to me? Mirror work. Every time I tell people, they hate it. That's how you know you need to do it. That's crazy, right? When we were at church, Minister Dante did this sermon one time where he asked the people in this audience the bones of the body, and we struggle to answer. And he started talking about how we don't even know our own bodies, which is so true, right? From a mental health perspective, I say the same things, right? Like, how can I take care of something I don't understand? Right? So how can I admire something I don't even want to look at? Every time I tell people stand in the mirror, it's a cringe thing. That lets me know already there's some body image things because you don't want to look at yourself. And it sounds crazy because that sounds vain. I'm not saying stare at yourself all day for 24 hours, but you don't want to versus all I want to do. Both is extreme.
Yeah. I like that.
Both are extreme, right? And from a literal example, how can I fix something I've never looked at, I've never seen, I've never observed, right?
Yeah.
So, like, whether it's just from waking up in the morning and you have eye boogers, and do you know that you have eye boogers? So, like, obviously we spend some amount of time, but it makes us uncomfortable. So we get very comfortable. Like, even in that sense, we done got these little mirrors that show us just this much of our body, so I can brush my teeth and get the eye gook out and keep it rolling.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to look at our whole image, literally and metaphorically. We don't want to look at all of ourselves. So there's these parts over here, let's just cut it out. We don't need no full body length mirror. Are you serious? It sounds crazy. As women, we talk about putting mirrors up and looking at your body, looking at your ass, at your vagina, like at your body, like lifting your boob, looking at it. People think these things are crazy. How I'm supposed to tell you anything about me and I don't know about it myself?
Okay. I like that.
It sounds crazy, right? So, even though this is a little TMI, when you go to the doctor, and when women go for pap smears, they're going to ask you certain questions. Odor, discharge, coloring, like even from nose, right? Like when you blow your nose, they ask you what's the color of your snot. Well, if you don't look in the tissue, how you know?
Yeah.
How would you ever know?
Right.
So, yeah, it's disgusting to look at the tissue, which is where discomfort comes, right? This is uncomfortable, so I won't do it. So now you don't have the information to give the doctor about how to heal your body.
Right, right.
How to make yourself feel better, which is the same example for the shadow work, right? This is an uncomfortable experience, so let me avoid it and not do it so that I don't heal. So I want this person over here. Because think about that from a perspective. All these people have to look at me. So I want you to have an experience with me that I'm not willing to have with myself.
Wow. Because other people will deal with your shadow.
And with your image, both.
Yeah.
Literally and metaphorically, they're going to look at you, right? They're going to look at your shadow. They're going to engage with their shadow. They're going to engage with your physical being and all of that, right? So if you don't want to deal with nothing literally or metaphorically, but you expect these other people to not only engage, but like it, compliment it, build it up, be nice to it. You're not doing none of that. You're avoiding it, which is already dismissive, which if somebody dismissed you on one level, you would have an attitude, but you're doing it to yourself.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm now expecting you to accept parts of me that I don't accept for myself. I don't even want to look at it, but you should look at it. Even to what you're saying, like what you can't smell your fingers or like look at all of these things, but you want someone else to be face first in all of you, but no, you ain't looking at it.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I didn't know where we were at first. And then when you face first, like with your hands like that, face first in all of you.
I tried to be subtle because I could tell you were like, are we going? I'm just saying because it sounds crazy when people say like, oh, like take a mirror and look at yourself.
Your vagina. Your vagina. Saying yourself.
But not just your vagina, your ass,
okay.
Men's balls, penis, all of it. Lift the balls up, look around it, look in your ass, stick your finger in your ass, stick your finger in my all ass. Of it, in your cooch, all of yes. Wow. How can I tell you what my discharge is if I've never seen it?
Okay. So this is the directive you're giving me right now. Is that later
literally
tonight
metaphorically,
or soon, lift my balls up and stick a finger in my ass.
I'm not telling you to stick a finger in your ass because this is where shadow work goes into play, right? And then we're going to talk about genders because there's a reason that a man is going to be more uncomfortable sticking his finger in his ass than a woman is.
Okay.
Because for a man, label shadow work gay.
I can make myself gay tonight.
Can't do that.
You're saying
gay. To some people, that's gay.
You're
so now that's offensive automatically because I'm not gay. But you've labeled that as gay. I haven't labeled it as.
I can put myself in the LGBT community tonight.
I didn't say you can, but some people think you can. With absolutely.
This one finger. That's powerful finger.
Which is the reason why, like you said, that's why shadow work is important and powerful because why would that instantly change my sexuality? That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's right here.
Matter of fact, so then I can't get enemas at the doctor or like any other kind of.
medical is excused.
So now he can stick his finger in and I'm not gay, but I can't stick my own finger in because that will make me gay. But that's what I'm saying. Where do these spectrums come into the conversation? But that's where we start to get into these things because now my sexuality is determined by someone else's thoughts and opinions about what is happening.
Yep.
My personal sexuality. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But this is where, like, obviously, it's like we're making fun a little bit, but this is where we get into a lot of troubles in society and in relationships because of the labels, which is what creates these stigmas, which is part of the shadow work, right? Because we forget, like, going all the way back to just basic levels, someone had to determine this is a mic. Mm-hmm. This is a computer. So somebody had to label it, to identify it, so that we can communicate with each other. Yeah. But in your language, you called it something else.
Right.
So we had to figure out ways to communicate with each other. So it's always been something that we've created, but it came as an external communication connection process, which is where it's challenging is because some of the stuff we're talking about is individual.
Yeah.
There's connection and there's individual. There's moments when I need to connect and there's moments I need to realize where that line is drawn and connect with myself.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle because that's the human battle of society. Like loneliness, existential angst, what is my place in society, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment. All of that is kind of wrapped up in that battle between us and others.
Yeah.
Parents want you to be a certain way. Teachers want you to be a certain way. Religious leaders want you to be a certain way. Your partner wants you to be a certain way. Your kids want you to be a certain way. And now here's little old you trying to determine in this whole fucking global scheme of shit, where do I stand?
Yeah.
Where do I fit? Where should I go? Who should I be? What should I do? Because everyone's pulling me all which way.
Yeah.
But if there's angst from that, you got to care what they think. Because, like, how could it be angsty if you don't give a fuck?
Right.
So part of it, like you said, what's the step? The first step is admitting you care. I think that might be the first step.
Okay.
I think I'm just realizing. I think that's the first step. Because if I'm saying I don't care, then how can it change?
Okay. Admitting you care
What people think.
Okay.
Admit that you've been influenced by what people think, right?
Okay.
Because that's part of the shadow work. If I don't care what no one thinks and no one tells me nothing and no one's ever told me nothing, then I'm not acknowledging that some of these things I'm identifying with have come from external points of view and perspectives.
Okay. So step one is admitting that the shadow got there because of what other people said and how we've reacted to it.
How we've reacted to what we've been taught. Right? Because even our beliefs, people hold so firmly to this is what I believe. Okay, from where? When you were 2, someone told you that. And then you may have had certain experiences that paralleled that or didn't. But that means you have to also flip it and stop discrediting other people's beliefs or experiences that they're communicating. Because because that's what people will do. Oh, you got this from a social media meme. You're influenced by your girlfriends or your guy friends, right? Oh, you got this from them. They told you to think or feel this way. So you've dismissed it, right? Because you're not realizing in your own life, someone tells you something, yes, that influences you. But it can only influence you so far. I got to believe it.
Yeah. We have to interact.
I have to have some experience that couples what they're saying in order for it to be a belief. Yeah. Right? Like in order for me to say this is something I believe or think or feel.
Agreement.
Absolutely. Which is where they will dismiss it. Oh, you don't really think that. You don't really feel that. You don't really believe that. Right?
Right.
Why? Because someone else also thinks or feels that way. But you have ideas and beliefs that come from things that people also said, which is where both of us need to be exploring that. Yeah. Where do these ideas really come from? Because it's easy to dismiss other people's, but do we ever dismiss our own? Well, what about your own? Do yours come from what somebody else has said?
Right.
Which is also where we get this superiority thing from, because it's like, oh, not me, but you.
Yeah.
I don't do that. You do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's embedded in the culture, even just on social media. Like, it's just this idea of I'm a different type of person.
Yeah, of course.
I think even part of that work is looking at moments in the past when your own perspective shifted or changed, because that helps to remind you, oh, it's possible, right?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that and use that almost as like a roadmap, that as firm as I feel about some things or as ashamed as I feel about some things, look at how both my core belief may have changed or work through the shame or itself or just change my mind. Yeah, that's interesting. So it's happened before. It's happening all the time.
All the time.
So we know that some of these things we're hiding or feel bad about, it can change our thoughts around it. So I like that. So it's like, admit you care what people think, love yourself, realize that you're sticking it past the hurt because it's for your good. And even another way to soothe yourself through it is to know, hey, I've changed thoughts before. I've changed beliefs before.
Y'all come back here.
That's how it goes.
That's like Beverly Hillbillies.
Y'all come back now.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
There we go.
Oh, and time for Friday. Friday.